everybody, this is Sean of Raw Slick Music. Today I want to talk about this beast right here. This is Bubbha Thomas and the Lightmen Creative Music, The Complete Works. It's a box set put out by Now Again Records in 2018. I've been eyeballing this thing for a while. I've listened to a couple of tracks from each one of these Lightmen records, and the stuff that I had heard, I really liked. And the idea that I could just get all 4 records in one nice convenient little set was pretty appealing. So about a month ago, I hit a point where the trickle of new releases had started to slow down. Saw an opportunity to pick this up and just went ahead and plopped down the money to pick it up. So now that I've given it a few listens, I wanted to share my thoughts and opinions of these records with you guys and let you know whether or not I think this box set is worth picking up. So with that being said, let's talk about this guy. So first off, before I even start talking about the music, I want to talk about the packaging of this guy, because to me the number one disappointment about this box set is its packaging. First off, you can only be loosely called a box set. This is a flimsy piece of paper that just wraps all 4 records, and as you can see, it's not really a box set. If anything, it's more like just an oversized obi that covers the entire records when it's still in its shrink wrap. And another thing, as cool as the photograph on this thing is, I'm not gonna hold on to this. Maybe I might actually frame this or something. But overall, right out the gate, this was one of the biggest disappointments to me, and probably actually just gonna throw this away after this video is finished. See you later. Another odd packaging choice for this was, although a lot of Now Again records come with their own informational book for all of their releases, every single record in the box set comes with its own individual book, and they are not unique to the record that they came with. This is literally 4 copies of the exact same book. It's a minor sort of oversight, and it's more just baffling that it is bad, but yeah, I'm still trying to figure out what the hell I'm gonna do with 4 copies of the same book. Anybody got any suggestions? Let me know down in the comments. But speaking of the book, another thing that is a little bit disappointing about this is, although there's some really cool photography and information and posters and stuff like that, and it is definitely passionately researched and written as always, the one thing I did find was sort of an odd choice. Although it seems as though Bubbha Thomas himself was very socially active, it seemed like the social activity and social life of Bubbha Thomas was the majority of the focus of the writings and background about Bubbha Thomas, which is all fine and good considering the time and where Bubbha Thomas was from. It sort of makes sense that that would be a major focus of what he wanted to talk about. It's a minor little thing, but I honestly wanted to hear more about the music and what was his mindset going into making a lot of these records, and it just doesn't really seem like that information's there. I don't know, maybe I'll have to go back and read it, but my first once through peruse of this book, I was left wanting to know more about creative process behind the music that he made, as well as learning about some of his socio-political ideas. So in that regard, this is also kind of a disappointment, but I can't really complain that there is some absolutely badass photography in here, and definitely keeping at least one of these copies is a must. So a little bit of background, and I know it took forever to get to this, but I did want to talk a little bit about Bubbha Thomas and the Lightmen. He was a drummer who was active a lot in the Texas music scene, and he was really known for sort of stepping outside what most people would associate Texas with. With Texas largely being known for a lot of country music, Texas actually had a pretty big funk and soul scene, but it wasn't really known for jazz. And I think that's why the Lightmen sort of stand out as a group. One thing that I thought was really interesting about the history of Bubbha Thomas specifically was one of his high school music teachers just so happened to be Conrad O. Johnson, who was most known for his work with the funkiest high school band you'll ever hear, the Kashmir Stage Band. So I thought that was pretty interesting how those worlds collided and how a lot of old Now Again releases have all sort of come full circle. So with a little bit of background out of the way, I did want to actually start talking a little bit about the music that's on these 4 records. Starting with the earliest record in the box set, Free As You Wanna Be, This This is some really just fine, semi-experimental, up-tempo, spiritual jazz. And as was sort of pointed out on the box set sleeve, that this actually predates a lot of the more experimental spiritual jazz that was coming out in the late 60s and early 70s. The quality of the music on here is absolutely fantastic. There's some great musicianship. A lot of the tracks on here are actually pretty lively, and I honestly absolutely love this record. And what's cool about both this one and this record is they have both stereo and mono versions of the album, so you could choose based on your preference. Me personally, I actually prefer mono, believe it or not. So after Free As You Wanna Be, there's Fancy Pants, their follow-up record as The Lightmen +1. And this one seems like, whereas this is more just sort of energetic and straightforward spiritual jazz, this seems to take on a little bit more of an emotive tone, and it shows them sort of playing around a little bit more with different sounds. You can hear them going in different experiments. Much like this record, there's a lot of flute, there's a lot of sax, and there's a lot of the best experimentation where they'll go off in weird directions that sound very much like free jazz, but eventually it'll be brought back together by some really cool melodies and go back into more straightforward territory. But where these two records, I think, are absolutely fantastic, the absolute masterpiece of this box set is this guy right here, the Lightmen +1 Energy Control Center. This is the record that I picked up this box set for, because unfortunately, out of all four of these records, this is the only one you cannot buy individually unless you go through Vinyl Me Please's vinyl service. And although it is only $40 over there, I figured if I'm gonna pick this record up, I might as well get the other three at the same time. And in that regard, that's why I think the box set is actually worth picking up. But most importantly, I think this record is just picking up because it's a damn fine jazz album. And not only is it a damn fine jazz album, it actually sort of moves in between sort of jazz and jazz funk, but does it in a very organic way. There's some really cool shifts in a lot of the songs, and there, again, like I was talking about with Fancy Pants, there are some moments of really cool musical experimentation that lead back into some really slick and really cool grooves. And quite honestly, if I were to recommend picking up this box set, I would pick it up just for this record right here. Specifically, the song All Praises to Allah is one of the best, coolest jazz tracks that I've heard, with its absolutely absorbing horn atmosphere and frantic drums, which appears on a lot of the tracks on these three jazz albums here. And honestly, the level of sort of musical creativity going on this record is absolutely fantastic. And like I said, this record right here is worth the price of admission alone. And then we come to the one oddity in the collection, and that's this guy right here. This is Bubbha Thomas and the Lightmen Country Fried Chicken. And this is probably the record that sticks out the most to me, and I've gravitated towards the most because it's definitely the most straightforward of all the records. This record really reminds me of a lot of Blackbird stuff, specifically their albums like Flying Start, Action, and City Life. All three of those records have a very strong synth element to them, as does this one. And much like those records, this is also a fairly mellow set, but the grooves on here still make it worthwhile. There's some really cool band interplay that's on here. These guys are extremely tight, extremely funky. And there's actually some really cool arrangements on here as well. Specifically, the one song that stands out to me on this one is All in Love is Fair, which is a really melancholic mood setter, not that different from the Lyman Woodard Organization Joy Road track, which is another favorite song of mine. Although it is definitely the most unique, shall we say, of the four records in here, even though it's definitely not a straightforward jazz album, there is still elements of jazz in here, as well as some really cool jazz funk rhythms going on here as well. The only thing that I'm not that big on is some of the boogie tracks near the end, like Boogie Down. I'm just not really into that type of music. But seriously, between all four of these records, there really isn't a bad track on here. Some of these songs stick out more to me than others. Some of them just sort of fade away shortly after listening to them. But I still have to say, this is some high quality jazz and jazz funk. Highly recommend that if you haven't picked up any of these records yet, pick up the box set if you still can. I do feel feel a little bit of sympathy towards the people who picked up these records individually and then had to get the box set if they wanted to get this record. But if you haven't picked up any of these records, seriously, some of the finest jazz that I've heard in a long time. Can't recommend these guys enough. And easily some of the best reissues I've heard from Now Again Records in a long time. So this one definitely gets a strong recommendation from me. And if you've got the money, definitely worth picking up these four guys. So that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thanks as always for watching. If you've listened to any of these records, let me know what you thought about them down in the comments below. Also, if you want to hear these records for yourself, please go over to my WordPress or Steemit blogs, because that's where I'll be posting music links to these and any of the records that I talk about on this channel. And as always, please head over to my Mixcloud, where you can hear Raw Select Radio, which is the audio component to this channel. Links to everything, as always, down in the description. But that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thanks as always for watching, and I will catch you in the next video. So until then, peace out!